The stars were dying one by one, and Admiral Kate Morrison knew it was only a matter of time before they came for Earth. She stood in the command center of Luna Base, watching the holographic display that showed the latest reports from the outer colonies. 7 red dots marked where human settlements once thrived. Now they were nothing but empty space and debris fields. The Kethvar Dominion had swept through them like a plague, leaving no survivors. "Another distress signal just cut out, Admiral," reported Lieutenant Danny Walsh from his communication station. His young face was pale as he looked up from his screens. "That's the mining colony on Kepler 442. 3 million people, gone in less than 6 hours. Kate clenched her fists. 3 million people. Families, children, workers who had never hurt anyone. All dead because they refused to bow down to alien masters. She had seen the recordings from the other attacks. The Kethvar always gave the same choice: surrender completely or face total destruction. No negotiations, no mercy for the weak. "What's our current fleet status?" she asked. Commander Lisa Parker, her second-in-command, pulled up the tactical display. "We have 43 ships of the line ready for combat, Admiral. The new Battleship Defiance finished her trials last week. Captain Ryan Hayes is requesting permission to take her out on patrol." Kate studied the ship's specifications on the screen. The Defiance was humanity's answer to 3 centuries of Kethvar victories. While other species had tried to match the aliens' biomechanical technology, humans had gone a different route. Their ships were built like flying fortresses, with thick armor plating, redundant systems, and enough firepower to level a small moon. "The Kethvar ships are different from anything we've ever faced," Kate said, walking around the holographic display. "Intelligence reports say they're alive somehow. They can heal damage in the middle of a fight and adapt to whatever weapons are used against them. Every species that has fought them has lost because they couldn't keep up with how fast the aliens learned." She paused at a picture on the wall showing Earth from space. Her home world looked so peaceful from that distance. No one could see the billions of people down there going about their daily lives, unaware that death was coming for them from the stars. "But every species that fought them made the same mistake," Kate continued. "They tried to out-tech the Kethvar. They built faster ships, stronger shields, more powerful weapons, and every time the aliens adapted and won." Lisa nodded. "Our engineers took a different approach. Instead of trying to be better than the Kethvar at what they do best, we focused on what humans do best." Kate smiled grimly. "Exactly. We don't adapt our technology to theirs. We make them adapt to ours. And humans have always been good at one thing above all others." "What's that, Admiral?" "Being unpredictable." The door to the command center slid open and Captain Ryan Hayes walked in. He was a tall man with graying hair and the kind of steady eyes that had seen too much combat. His uniform bore the scars of several battles, and he moved with the confidence of someone who had never lost a fight. "Admiral Morrison," he said, saluting. "I've been monitoring the Kethvar advance. At their current speed, they'll reach the Haven's Gate system in 72 hours. Kate felt her stomach tighten. Haven's Gate was the key to everything. It was a junction system with jump gates that connected to 12 different human colonies, including the route to Earth itself. If the aliens took Haven's Gate, they could strike at the heart of human space. "How many ships are they bringing?" she asked. Ryan consulted his tablet. "Long-range scouts report at least 60 vessels. All of them are the big bioships we've been hearing about. Each one is roughly the size of our heavy cruisers, but they move and fight like living creatures." 60 ships, Kate repeated. "And we have 43. 44 if you count the Defiance," Ryan said. "She's ready for combat, Admiral. My crew has been drilling non-stop for the past month. We know every bolt and wire on that ship." Kate looked at the tactical display again. The Kethvar had never lost a battle, not once in 3 centuries of conquest. They would arrive at Haven's Gate expecting another easy victory. They would demand surrender, and when it was refused, they would attack with overwhelming force. But this time would be different. This time, they wouldn't be fighting another species trying to copy their technology. They would be fighting humans, and humans had spent their entire history finding new ways to kill each other. They were very good at it. "Ryan," she said finally, "take the Defiance to Haven's Gate. Position yourself between the jump gates and the approaching fleet. Just the Defiance, Admiral, against 60 alien ships? Kate smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Trust me, Captain. The Defiance won't be alone when it matters, but for now I want you to do something that no other species has done when facing the Kethvar. What's that? I want you to make them angry. Make them overconfident. Let them think they're facing just one ship crewed by primitive humans who don't know any better. Ryan grinned. I think I can handle that, Admiral. As the captain left to prepare his ship, Kate turned back to the display. The red dots marking dead human colonies seemed to pulse like wounds. But soon, very soon, the Kethvar would learn why. Humans had conquered their own world before reaching for the stars. They had never learned to lose gracefully. The Haven's gate system was quiet when the Kethvar fleet arrived. Too quiet. War Prime Zekthar stood on the bridge of his flagship, studying the scanner readings with growing confusion. His biomechanical vessel pulsed around him like a living heart, its organic walls glowing with soft purple light. Through the transparent sections of the hull he could see the rest of his fleet spreading out in perfect formation. 60 ships, each one a masterpiece of bioengineering that could heal itself, adapt to enemy weapons, and learn from every battle. In 300 years of conquest, this fleet had never faced defeat. Today should be no different. War Prime, his scanner operator hissed in their native tongue. The system appears to be defended by only one vessel. Zekthar's 4 eyes narrowed as he looked at the main display. There, hanging motionless in space between his fleet and the blank inner planets, was a single human ship. It was ugly compared to the flowing lines of Kethvar vessels, all sharp angles and brutal functionality, covered in thick armor plating that made it look more like a flying fortress than a starship. Just one ship? He asked. Yes, War Prime. It is approximately 800 meters long. Our sensors detect heavy armament and thick shielding, but nothing that should pose a threat to our fleet. Zekthar clicked his mandibles in amusement. He had seen this before. Sometimes a species would make a desperate last stand, sending their best ship to die gloriously while their people evacuated. It was pointless but touching in its own way. Open communications with the human vessel, he ordered. On the bridge of the USS Defiance, Captain Ryan Hayes sat calmly in his command chair as the alien transmission came through. The translator gave Zekthar's words a cold, mechanical tone. Human, vessel, you are in the path of the Kethvar Dominion. Surrender now and your deaths will be swift. Resist and we will make your suffering last for days. Ryan looked around his bridge. His crew was young but experienced, hand-picked from the best the fleet had to offer. Lieutenant Commander Jake Sullivan at the weapons console gave him a slight nod. Chief Engineer Lisa Parker was monitoring her systems with calm efficiency. At communications, Lieutenant Sarah Brooks had her finger hovering over a specific button. Ryan stood up and activated the reply channel. His voice was steady and clear. This system is under the protection of the Terran Defense Fleet. Turn back now or face the consequences. The silence that followed lasted nearly a full minute. Then Zekthar's laughter echoed through the Defiance's speakers. It was not a pleasant sound. One ship, the War Prime said, challenges an entire fleet. Your species must be even more primitive than we thought. Very well, human. We will give you the honor of dying first. The channel closed. On the Defiance's bridge, several crew members exchanged glances. They were about to face 60 enemy ships with weapons and armor that could adapt to anything thrown at them. By all logic, they should be terrified. Instead, Ryan noticed that most of his people were smiling. Jake, he said to his tactical officer, what's our weapons status? All systems green, Captain. The new kinetic cannons are loaded and ready. Electromagnetic pulse torpedoes are armed, and the special surprise package is standing by. Lisa, how are our engines? Running at optimal efficiency, sir. The fusion reactors are producing more power than we know what to do with. Ryan nodded. The Defiance was indeed heavily armed and armored, but that wasn't what made her special. What made her special was what the Kethvar sensors couldn't detect. Hidden within her massive hull were dozens of smaller vessels, each one capable of independent operation. Drone fighters, automated weapon platforms, and even manned attack craft waited in concealed bays. But the real secret weapon was something no alien species had ever encountered before: human unpredictability. War Prime, the Kethvar scanner. Operator reported, "The human ship is not moving. It remains directly in our path." Zekthar studied the tactical display. Standard procedure was to send probe fighters first. These small bioships would engage the enemy, analyze their weapons and tactics, then relay that information back to the main fleet. Within minutes, every ship in the Armada would know exactly how to counter whatever the humans could throw at them. "Launch Probe Squadron Alpha," he ordered. "Full tactical analysis. I want to know everything about that ship's capabilities." 12 sleek biofighters detached from the main fleet and streaked toward the Defiance. Their living hulls shifted and changed as they flew, already beginning to adapt to the energy signatures they were detecting. On the human ship, alarms began to sound. "Incoming fighters," Jake reported. 12 contacts, closing fast. "Sarah, send the signal," Ryan ordered. Lieutenant Brooks pressed the button she had been waiting for. To any casual observer, it looked like she was broadcasting a standard damage control alert to the rest of the human fleet. But hidden in the transmission were coordinates, tactical data, and a simple 2-word message: "Game on." "Launch our fighters," Ryan said. "But remember, people, we're not trying to win this first engagement. We're trying to learn." The Defiance's launch bays opened, and 20 human fighters roared out to meet the approaching aliens. But these weren't ordinary military pilots flying in formation. Each one had been specifically chosen for their ability to think creatively under pressure. Lieutenant Tony Garcia immediately began flying in a corkscrew pattern that served no tactical purpose except to confuse enemy targeting systems. Lieutenant Kelly Martinez deliberately powered down her shields and rerouted the energy to her engines, making her fighter's energy signature completely different from what it had been seconds before. The Kethvar probe fighters, designed to analyze and adapt to predictable military tactics, found themselves facing something they had never encountered: pilots who seemed to be making up their strategy as they went along. "War Prime," the scanner operator's voice carried a note of confusion. "The human fighters are not following any recognizable attack pattern." Zekthar watched the engagement with growing interest. The probe fighters were trying to adapt, but every time they adjusted to counter one human tactic, the pilots would switch to something completely different. It was like trying to fight an enemy that had no plan at all, which he was beginning to realize might be exactly the point. "Interesting," he murmured. "Perhaps these humans are not quite as primitive as they appear." The first probe fighter exploded as a human missile found its mark, then another. Within minutes, half of the Kethvar squadron was destroyed or fleeing, back to the main fleet. But Ryan Hayes wasn't celebrating. He was studying the scanner readings of the alien ships, noting how they moved, how they fought, and most importantly, how they tried to adapt. "Jake," he said quietly, "did you get all that?" "Every bit of it, Captain. The aliens are definitely learning from each engagement, but there's a pattern to how they adapt, almost like they're following a program." "Good, because they're about to get a lot more data to process, and most of it is going to be wrong." Ryan settled back in his command chair as the Kethvar main fleet began to advance. Phase 1 was complete. Now the real battle could begin. War Prime Zekthar was no longer amused. His probe fighters had returned to the fleet damaged and confused. The biomechanical ships trembled as they tried to process the data they had gathered from the human fighters. Their living computers were struggling to find patterns in what appeared to be complete chaos. "Analysis complete, War Prime," his tactical officer reported. "The human fighters use no standard formations or attack patterns. Each pilot appears to be acting independently with no coordination." "That's impossible," Zekthar replied. "No military force can function without discipline and coordination. There must be something we're missing." On his display, the single human battleship still hung motionless in space, blocking the path to the inner system. It had made no aggressive moves, launched no additional attacks. It simply waited, like a predator confident in its strength, Send. Attack wave beta, Zekthar ordered. 30 fighters this time. Full combat engagement. I want that ship destroyed. The second wave of Kethvar biofighters launched from the fleet. These were larger and more heavily armed than the probes, their living hulls already shifting to counter the tactics they had observed in the first engagement. Their weapons adapted to match the energy signatures of human shields, and their armor reconfigured to resist the types of missiles the humans had used. But Commander Amy Foster was ready for them. She led the Defiance's fighter wing personally, her voice calm and steady over the radio as she coordinated the defense. But her coordination was unlike anything the Kethvar had ever seen. Blue Squadron, remember what we practiced, she said. Tony, I want you to fly like you're drunk. Kelly, pretend your engines are failing. And Marcus, use those aerobatic moves you learned at the academy. Lieutenant Marcus Webb grinned inside his cockpit. The ones that got me in trouble for showing off? Those are the ones. Show these aliens what showing off really looks like. The human fighters met the Kethvar attack wave in what looked like a disorganized brawl. Tony Garcia's fighter wobbled and weaved like a damaged ship, drawing enemy fire away from his teammates. Kelly Martinez's engines sputtered and died at seemingly random moments, causing her to drop out of targeting solutions just as weapons locked onto her. But Marcus Webb put on the real show. His fighter danced through space in impossible spirals and loops, performing maneuvers that served no tactical purpose except to confuse and frustrate the enemy. The Kethvar fighters tried to track him, their biomechanical systems churning as they attempted to predict his next move. They couldn't. How could they predict moves that Marcus himself was making up on the spot? War Prime, the tactical officer's voice carried a note of panic. Our fighters are reporting system failures. They cannot establish firing solutions on the human vessels. Zekthar watched in growing frustration as his superior fighters were outmaneuvered by what appeared to be a group of undisciplined pilots. 3 of his bioships had already been destroyed while the humans had lost only 1 fighter. How is this possible? He demanded. The humans are not following any known tactical doctrine, came the reply. Our adaptive systems require patterns to counter. These pilots appear to have no patterns at all. On the Defiance's bridge, Captain Ryan Hayes was having a very different conversation with his crew. Jake, are you getting all this data? Lieutenant Commander Sullivan nodded as he watched his screens. Every bit of it, Captain. The alien ships are trying to adapt to our tactics, but they're following a predictable algorithm. Watch this. He highlighted one of the Kethvar fighters on the display. See how it changes its shield frequency every time Kelly fires at it? It's trying to counter her weapons, but it's doing it in a specific sequence. First, it tries to match her energy output. Then it shifts to counter her missile type. Then it adjusts for her targeting system. So they're not really adapting, Ryan said. They're just following a very complex program. Exactly. And if we can figure out the program, we can stay ahead of it. Ryan smiled. This was what human engineers had spent months preparing for. While other species had tried to build better technology than the Kethvar, humans had focused on understanding how their adaptation worked, and understanding something was the first step to beating it. Lisa, are the special weapons ready? Chief Engineer, Parker nodded from her station. All systems are go, Captain. The kinetic cannons are loaded with tungsten rounds, the EMP torpedoes are armed, and the chemical warheads are standing by. These were the weapons that had been specifically designed to counter biomechanical systems. Instead of energy weapons, that could be adapted to, humans had gone back to basics. Solid metal slugs that punched through adaptive armor, electromagnetic pulses that disrupted biological neural networks, chemical compounds that were toxic to organic systems. The Kethvar had never faced weapons like these because no other species had thought to use them. Most civilizations considered kinetic weapons primitive and chemical warfare barbaric. But humans had used both throughout their history, and they were very good at it. Sir, Sarah Brooks called from communications. I'm picking up chatter from the alien fleet. It sounds like they're getting frustrated. Ryan could believe it. The second wave of Kethvar fighters was in full retreat, having lost nearly half their number to human pilots who seemed to fight like madmen. But he knew the real test was coming. War Prime, the scanner operator reported. The human ship is launching additional fighters. Zekthar watched as more small craft poured out of the Defiance's launch bays. But these were different from the first two waves. Some were unmanned drones that moved in perfect formation. Others were larger craft that looked more like flying, weapons platforms than fighters. Finally, he said, now we'll see their real tactics. But he was wrong again. The new human craft didn't follow standard tactics either. The drones flew in formations that constantly shifted and changed, making it impossible to predict their next target. The larger craft seemed to be testing different weapons against different parts of the Kethvar fleet, as if they were conducting experiments rather than fighting a battle, which Ryan realized was exactly what they were doing. Jake, fire a spread of kinetic rounds at the lead bioship. I want to see how it responds. The Defiance's main gun spoke for the first time, sending a stream of tungsten slugs toward the enemy flagship. The round struck the biomechanical hull with tremendous force, punching through armor that should have been impenetrable. Direct hits, Jake reported. The alien ship is trying to adapt its armor, but the kinetic rounds are too fast. It can't shift its defenses quickly enough. Good. Now try the EMP torpedoes on the smaller ships. The electromagnetic pulse weapons found their targets and detonated in brilliant flashes of light. The affected Kethvar ships convulsed as their biological systems were disrupted, their weapons powering down and their flight patterns becoming erratic. Zekthar stared at his display in shock. His ships were being hurt by weapons that his species had dismissed as primitive thousands of years ago. How could simple metal slugs and electromagnetic pulses be effective against biomechanical armor that could adapt to any energy weapon? War Prime, his tactical officer said. Our ships cannot adapt to these weapons. They are too simple for our systems to counter. For the first time in 3 centuries of conquest, Zekthar began to doubt his inevitable victory. These humans were not like the other species he had faced. They didn't try to match his technology or copy his tactics. Instead, they used their own strengths in ways he had never seen before, and they were winning. War Prime Zekthar had seen enough. His fleet had been toying with a single human ship for over an hour, and somehow they were losing. 8 of his bioships were damaged or destroyed, while the ugly human battleship seemed barely scratched. Its thick armor plating was scorched and dented, but it kept fighting with the same stubborn determination. This ends now, he declared. All ships full attack formation. Concentrate all fire on that human vessel. I want it reduced to scrap metal. The entire Kethvar fleet began to move forward. 60 massive bioships, their living hulls pulsing with angry light, closed in on the lone Defiance. Their weapons charged with enough power to destroy a small moon, and their adaptive systems had finally begun to find patterns in human behavior. On the bridge of the Defiance, alarms were screaming. Hull breaches were reported on multiple decks, and several weapon systems were offline. The ship shuddered under the combined assault of the alien fleet. Hull integrity down to 60%, Chief Engineer Lisa Parker reported. Her voice strained. I don't know how much more we can take, Captain. Captain Ryan Hayes gripped his command chair as another salvo of alien weapons struck his ship. Through the smoke and sparks on his bridge, he could see his crew still working at their stations. They were scared, but they weren't giving up. Sarah, he called to his communications officer, how long until our friends arrive? Lieutenant Sarah. Brooks checked her console. Throughout the battle, she had been sending what appeared to be damage reports and supply requests, but hidden in those transmissions were coordinates, tactical data, and timing signals. Any minute now, Captain, she replied. Jake Sullivan at the weapons station looked up from his displays. Sir, the aliens are moving into their final attack formation. All their ships are focused on us now. Ryan smiled grimly. This was the moment they had been waiting for. The Kethvar had done exactly what Admiral Morrison had predicted they would do. Faced with unexpected resistance, they had committed their entire fleet to destroying what they saw as a single stubborn enemy. They had no idea what was about to hit them. War Prime, the Kethvar scanner operator suddenly called out. I'm detecting new contacts. Multiple ships approaching from the asteroid belt. Zekthar's 4 eyes widened as his display lit up with new targets. Ships were emerging from hiding places throughout the Haven's Gate system. They had been concealed behind asteroids, inside gas giant atmospheres, and even hiding in the shadows of dead moons. "How many?" he demanded. 40 ships, War Prime, all human vessels, approaching at high speed. Admiral Kate Morrison's voice echoed across all frequencies as the Third Fleet revealed itself. "This is Admiral Morrison of the Terran Defense Fleet. You are surrounded and outgunned. Surrender now or face the consequences." The trap was complete. The Kethvar fleet, thinking they were attacking a single ship, had positioned themselves perfectly to be surrounded by the entire human fleet. Every alien vessel was now caught in a crossfire with nowhere to run, but the humans weren't done with their surprises. Commander Brett Jackson aboard the USS Thunderbolt was the first to demonstrate humanity's newest tactic. Instead of trying to avoid damage like every other species the Kethvar had fought, his ship deliberately flew into the path of enemy weapons. "What are you doing?" his first officer asked in shock. "Learning," Brett replied as alien bioweapons tore into his ship's armor. "Every shot they take at us gives us more data about how their weapons work." Throughout the human fleet, captains were taking similar risks. They allowed enemy weapons to hit them, studying the effects and transmitting the data to Dr. Nina Clark aboard the medical ship USS Mercy. She had been analyzing captured Kethvar biomaterial for weeks, looking for weaknesses in their organic technology. "I've got it," she announced over the fleet communications. "The biological components in their ships are vulnerable to specific chemical compounds. I'm transmitting the formulas now." Within minutes, human ships throughout the fleet were manufacturing new types of ammunition, chemical warheads designed to poison the living parts of Kethvar vessels, biological agents that attacked the organic neural networks controlling their weapons and shields. The aliens had adapted to energy weapons, kinetic rounds and electromagnetic pulses, but they had never encountered weapons specifically designed to kill living tissue. "War Prime," his tactical officer's voice was filled with panic. "Our ships are reporting system failures across the fleet. The biological components are dying." Zekthar watched in horror as his perfect biomechanical ships began to convulse and die. Their living hulls turned gray and brittle, their adaptive systems shutting down one by one. The weapons that had conquered 1,000 worlds were failing because humans had done something no other species had thought to try. They had turned the Kethvar's greatest strength into their greatest weakness. The USS Defiance, no longer fighting alone, pressed its attack against the alien flagship. Captain Hayes had saved his most powerful weapons for this moment. "Jake, load the special package," he ordered. "With pleasure, Captain." The Defiance's main gun fired a single round at the enemy flagship. But this wasn't an ordinary kinetic slug or chemical warhead. It was a delivery system containing millions of microscopic machines designed by human engineers specifically to target biomechanical systems. The nanobots spread through the alien ship like a virus, attacking every organic component they could find. The flagship's living hull began to decay and crumble, its biological computers failing as their neural pathways were severed. Zekthar felt his ship dying around him. The walls that had pulsed with life were now cold and gray. His adaptive weapons were offline, his biomechanical systems were shutting down, and his fleet was being systematically destroyed by an enemy he had underestimated. For the first time in 3 centuries, the War Prime of the Kethvar Dominion faced the possibility of defeat. "Damage report," he demanded. 43 ships destroyed or disabled, War Prime. The remaining vessels are suffering critical system failures. Our adaptive capabilities are completely compromised. Zekthar looked at his tactical display. The human fleet surrounded him like a pack of predators, their weapons trained on his remaining ships, but they weren't firing anymore. They were waiting. A communication request came from the human flagship. With no other choice, Zekthar accepted it. Captain Hayes appeared on his screen, his uniform torn and his face covered in soot from battle damage. But his eyes were steady and confident. "War Prime Zekthar," Hayes said, "your fleet is defeated. Your ships are dying, and your weapons are useless against us. I'm offering you one chance to surrender with honor." "You cannot defeat us," Zekthar replied. though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "We are the Kethvar Dominion. We have conquered worlds for 3 centuries. "Not anymore," Hayes said simply. "Today, you learned what happens when you underestimate humanity. We don't fight to match your strengths, we fight to exploit your weaknesses, and everyone has weaknesses." Zekthar looked around his dying ship, at his crew struggling with failing systems, at his fleet reduced to scattered debris. The humans had done the impossible. They had beaten an enemy that had never known defeat, and they had done it by refusing to fight fair. The silence in space was broken only by the dying gasps of biomechanical ships. War Prime Zekthar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching his fleet fall apart around him. Ships that had lived and breathed for centuries were now cold metal, husks drifting in the void. The organic neural networks that had made them invincible were dead, killed by weapons no other species had ever thought to use. His tactical officer looked up from a failing console. "War Prime, we have lost 57 ships. Only 3 vessels remain operational, and they are heavily damaged." Zekthar's mandibles clicked in bitter defeat. 3 ships out of 60. In all his years of conquest, he had never lost more than 5 ships in a single battle. Now his entire fleet was destroyed by creatures he had dismissed as primitive. "Incoming transmission from the human fleet," his communications officer reported. Admiral Kate Morrison's face appeared on the main screen. Behind her, Zekthar could see the organized chaos of a military command center. Humans worked at their stations with calm efficiency, monitoring the battle's aftermath. "War Prime Zekthar," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had just won an impossible victory. "Your fleet is defeated. Your invasion is over. I'm offering you terms for surrender." Zekthar straightened to his full height. Even in defeat, he would maintain his dignity. "What terms do you offer?" "Simple ones. Withdraw from all human space immediately. Never return. In exchange, we'll allow your surviving ships to leave and carry word back to your dominion. And if I refuse?" Kate's expression didn't change. "Then we finish what we started here, your choice." Zekthar looked at his remaining ships on the tactical display. They were barely functional, their crews struggling to keep basic life support working. The humans could destroy them easily if they chose to, but there was something else in the human admiral's offer. She wasn't demanding his personal surrender or the submission of his people. She was simply telling him to leave and never come back. It was almost respectful. "Why do you offer these terms?" he asked. "You could destroy us completely." Kate leaned forward slightly. "Because we're not conquerors, War Prime. We're defenders. We fight to protect our people, not to build an empire. All we want is for you to leave us alone." Captain Ryan Hayes appeared, beside the Admiral on the screen. His ship, the Defiance, was badly damaged but still functional. Smoke drifted behind him, and repair crews could be seen working in the background. "There's something else you should know," Ryan said. "This battle is being recorded and transmitted to every species in the galaxy. They're all going to see exactly how your invincible fleet was defeated." Zekthar felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. The Kethvar Dominion's power had always been based on fear. Other species surrendered without fighting because they believed resistance was hopeless, but now, "You're showing them our weaknesses," he said. "We're showing them that you have weaknesses," Kate corrected. "Every empire does. Every enemy can be beaten if you're smart enough and determined enough to find the right way to fight them." She paused, then continued. "The galaxy is going to know that the Kethvar can be stopped. They're going to know that biomechanical adaptation has limits, and they're going to know that sometimes the old ways of fighting work better than the new ones." Ryan nodded. "Your reign of terror is over, War Prime. Not because we destroyed your entire species, but because we proved you're not invincible. Other worlds will find the courage to resist now." Dr. Nina Clark's voice came over the communication channel from her medical ship. "I'm uploading the complete biological analysis of your ship's vulnerabilities to the Galactic Information Network. Any species that wants to defend itself against you will know exactly how to do it." Zekthar realized the full scope of what the humans had done. They hadn't just defeated his fleet. They had destroyed the myth of Kethvar invincibility. Every Species that had cowered before his advance would now know that the Dominion could be beaten. "You have doomed us," he said quietly. "No," Kate replied. "We've given the galaxy hope. What your people do with that is up to them. You can continue trying to conquer others and face constant resistance, or you can find a different path." "Lieutenant." Sarah Brooks spoke up from her station on the Defiance. "War Prime, we're detecting movement from your surviving ships. Are you accepting our terms?" Zekthar looked at his crew. They were waiting for his decision, but he could see the defeat in their eyes. They had spent their lives believing they served an unstoppable force. Now that illusion was shattered. "We accept your terms," he said finally. "The Kethvar fleet will withdraw from human space and will not return." "Good," Kate said. "You have 1 hour to collect any survivors from your damaged ships and begin your journey home." The communication ended, leaving Zekthar alone with his thoughts. Around him, his crew began the humiliating task of preparing for retreat. Ships that had entered this system as conquerors would leave as defeated refugees. But as he watched the human fleet maintaining their positions, Zekthar found himself thinking about something Captain Hayes had said. The humans hadn't tried to match Kethavar technology or copy their tactics. Instead, they had used their own strengths in ways no one expected. They had been unpredictable, creative, stubborn enough to refuse surrender even when facing impossible odds. And they had turned those qualities into weapons more effective than any biomechanical marvel. An hour later, the 3 surviving Kethvar ships limped out of the Haven's Gate system. Behind them, the human fleet remained in formation, watching their departure. The Defiance, scarred and smoking but unbroken, held its position until the alien ships disappeared into hyperspace. On the bridge of the flagship, Captain Hayes slumped in his command chair as the adrenaline of battle finally faded. Around him, his crew was already beginning damage assessment and repairs. "Captain," Jake Sullivan reported from his weapons station. "Long-range sensors confirm the Kethvar ships have left the system." "Good," Ryan replied. "Sarah, send a message to Fleet Command. Tell them Haven's Gate is secure." But even as he spoke, Ryan knew the real victory wasn't just saving one star system. Admiral Morrison had been right about the bigger picture. By broadcasting the battle to the entire galaxy, they had given every oppressed species the knowledge and courage to fight. Back on the Kethvar Dominion's 3-century reign of terror was over. Not because humanity had destroyed them, but because humanity had shown the galaxy that they could be stopped. Chief Engineer Lisa Parker looked up from her damage reports. "Captain, it's going to take weeks to repair all the damage to the ship." Ryan smiled, thinking about the colonies that would remain free, the species that would find courage to resist, and the children who would grow up in a galaxy where no empire was truly invincible. "That's all right, Lisa," he said. "We've got time. And thanks to what we did here today, a lot of people are going to have time too." The Defiance turned toward home, carrying with it the proof that sometimes a single ship, crewed by stubborn humans who refused to give up, could change the fate of an entire galaxy.